Okay, turn down the audio as well. You can hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Am I audible?
Absolutely. Where are you now, Madhi? Are you in Chennai or where are you?
Bangalore. I'm in Bangalore.
Bangalore.
I'm doing another startup for the last few years on beverages.
Yeah? Wow. On beverages?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're really glad to host Mr. Vaitheeswaran and Mr. Balakrishnan here today. And today, with this panel discussion, we aim to chronicle the journey of both of these great entrepreneurs and cover their initial ideas, the roadblocks they face, understand their opinions of the ecosystem and how it's changed over the years. So let's break down and jump into the first question. So I'd like to ask this to you, Mr. Balakrishnan. Unlike today, with Reliance Jio democratizing the internet usage in India, in the 1990s and early 2000s, India had barely any internet users. So apart from the low internet penetration in the country due to underdeveloped infrastructure or lack thereof, what else do you think are the possible reasons for the country's resistance to adopting the internet and using, services on the internet?
I think, in a sense, if you analyze most tech markets in India, we always claim we are a 1 billion population country, etc. But people who adopt tech in this country is actually very, very small. And you can count, you can count in the order of magnitudes. Active users are maybe 40 million, 70 million, 80 million. So I think part of it is the economic situation. Not many people can, at that time, even today, afford a laptop. Coming up, the mobile phone has made a big difference, very big difference. Okay, so I think the challenges are many. It is not just in internet markets. In most markets in India, the challenge is both of very small users who adopt new technology, and also very few people on repeat buying. So I think so. It has to be heavily subsidized. You can see that India's e-commerce companies are kind of losing mind-boggling amount. Each of them are losing 10,000 crores and 20,000 crores, things of that kind. I can't even rub my eyes. Am I getting defective in eyesight? I'm seeing more zeros when I should not be seeing zeros. So I think that's a challenge exists. India, in spite of all our bragging and everything, is relatively still a poor country. That's a problem. But things are changing fast. The availability of cheap mobile phones and the availability of very, very cheap internet access, particularly in the last 5-7 years, is going to make a difference. Okay.
All right. So on that note, Mr. Vaitheeswaran, I'd like your opinions on this as well as we'd like to understand the resistance that Indians faced while using an e-commerce platform and how Indiaplaza managed to, deal with that roadblock to scale up.
Okay, so first let me talk about the same thing that Ajit was mentioning. Okay. I think if you look at the numbers, when we started in 99, there were probably less than 3 million people using the internet in India. And as far as people who were shopping online, that number is certainly less than 20,000 people. And almost all of them just shopped on one site called Amazon.com. So it was just the early days. And, the real challenge for us was, in retrospect, I think it was the fact that many reasons that Ajit was mentioning, the fact that we were probably a decade earlier. But the unfortunate thing is, none of us knew about this when we started. The reality is, if we knew that we were 10 years ahead, we would start 10 years late, right? It's a fairly simple solution. But you start making some assumptions. It's only when you're way down, you realize that you're actually traveling alone and there's nobody else. And the other big blockade that we feel specifically for e-commerce, and I'm sure Rediff had its own separate set of challenges for content access. But as far as commerce is concerned, I think we were trying to do something that had never happened before. We had all grown up with a very healthy skepticism and suspicion of the shopkeeper, right? All of us grew up in an environment where we expect the shopkeeper's job is to take the consumer for a ride. And here we are trying to build a trust, telling people shop online and we'll take care of returns and we'll get a product, pay us in advance. And I think it took a whole lot of time to break. I mean, it was a habit breaking thing. It was a mental block. I mean, the excuses were, less number of internet people, less number of credit cards. But to me, the biggest block that we faced is the fact that fundamentally Indians were suspicious of shopkeepers. And it takes a long time to break that suspicion, which is obviously a decade or a generation or more. So that was a real blockade.
All right. So moving on to the next question. So to build an internet-centric company in an era where a minuscule population of India was using the internet is quite a brave move and quite a commendable effort. So what do you think the people in India, how are they different back then, and how has the average user changed today? And today, why is it easier to overcome these roadblocks that you all have just mentioned?
Oh, let me try and think that up. I don't think India is much different from other countries. I think we keep our eyes and ears open to seeing what's going on in the United States, which probably is a little exception to most countries. But in the United States, they have a standard of living far, far ahead of what we have. Secondly, and this is very important, practically every major internet success in the United States have had initial funding from the Department of Defense. Okay, if you read the research paper of the original two Google founders, at the front page, they always had a thing, thank you Defense DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project thing, for having funded this paper. Even the Google paper on how to search was funded by them. Now, that is something noticeably missing in most countries. I mean, even the Europeans don't have a state defense supporting their supporting the tech innovation to the extent that the United States has. So I think that is the biggest missing thing, because if you study technology market evolution, as I've been spending many hours doing, in the first, when a new innovation appears, the early adopters are very few. So you need somebody to fund and see you through the first 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and without the entrepreneur losing control. So in the United States, you can go and pitch it to the Defense Department, and if you have a convincing enough pitch, they will fund you. For example, I think in this current rush, there are 2 or 3 big movements happening right now as we speak. One, of course, is the move towards cloud services. It's a huge movement where the PC is about to vanish from the desktops in the next 2, 3, 4 years. Movement to the cloud. And in the middle of all this, about 3 years ago, the Defense Department gave Amazon I think a 10 to 15 billion dollar order to build a cloud system for the defense. So those kind of military orders are what subsidizes, the early adoption. So it is not just the consumer which is lacking. The consumers will be skeptical always in every country. So I think we should not blame Indian consumers for the problem that we always face. But I think it's the defense group. And I have in my time gone into, I founded Rediff.com in 1995, the days of yore, 2 to 3 years before Google was founded, incidentally. And many years before Facebook, I think Zuckerberg was in probably high school when I founded Rediff.com. I'm pretty sure about it. Now, but I think our defense is, most of our senior defense officers are arts graduates. They don't understand. We've made innumerable pitches to see, look, give us an initial order, etc. They understand everything, but they don't give it. So I think the key element in India is, I think, not enough initial defense orders, which is what America has, which no other country has, but Americans have it. And virtually every major breakthrough in the United States has come, including the internet itself. The internet itself, TCP, IP, and related things, were part of the Defense Department efforts. So please remember that.
So, Mr. Vaitheeswaran, can we get your opinions on the same?
Yeah, so, my view is that the key changes that are there from a consumer point of view is, well, the first big thing is exactly like Ajit was mentioning, you need capital support to help any new innovation to become popular. You want millions of people to actually try and create a habit. And during those early years, you need sustenance. One way of that is to, like he was mentioning, get a series of corporate support or defense support, which doesn't exist in India. The other is to provide capital support. Now, the good thing is, if you look at internet companies and the modern age startups today have significant capital support, but that was also not available for us. In other words, not only were we focusing on trying to change consumer habits and do something that's never been done before, we also had to have the wherewithal to keep the business going financially. And it's also a matter of timing. So, for example, when we started in 99, uh, within 2 months we were caught in what is now called the dot-com boom, where everybody got significantly funded. But the difference between the dot-com boom and the bust in India, as far as the US is concerned, in US the difference between the boom and the bust was fairly long period. I mean, it allowed several companies, the Amazons of the world in those days, to build something. In our case, specifically in our case, in we launched in September 99, and the dot-com bust happened in April 2000, which means in less than 6 months, right, we moved from huge highs to massive lows. And within that period, we had to find ways of building a new business, innovate, change customer habits, and also get the capital support. So obviously, it's at some stage you look back and realize that we were really fighting with our backs against the wall from a timing point of view. I think that's the big change today. If you start something and you have with the right background and all of that, you raising capital, and I'm talking serious capital, millions and millions of dollars are not very difficult to raise today, and allows you to do it. What they do with the capital, and whether they do it sensibly or wisely or end up losing several thousand crores like Ajit was mentioning, full of zeros, that's a separate issue. But the fact of the matter is the capital support in itself is available, which was not there. And that's the real challenge that, over when I look back, I think was something that held us back.
So, Mr. Balakrishnan, how did the dot-com bubble affect Rediff.com as well? And how did you all deal with the sudden drop in the market?
Well, what actually the thing was, I'd say fortunately, unfortunately, we were already trading on NASDAQ when that thing happened. Okay. It's another story how we got to trade on NASDAQ, but that I'll tell you. When it collapsed, we had to, everything was new because, well, I thought I was a very bright guy and I knew lots of things. Very few people at that time in India understood what the NASDAQ was. So I even physically moved to New York City to get to know the ways of the local natives. And that was quite educative, because in America, particularly in New York City, the Wall Street is a kind of a culture like in India, Swamijis and things are, in India, what, saffron-clad Swamijis are respected. Similarly, in America, I think jacket-wearing and tie-wearing Wall Street fellas are like semi-gods. Really, you should see. And my family, my wife and I were living in Union Square, so in the evening, sitting at a bar, we encounter all of them. And I could almost, like an anthropologist, try and figure out what's really going on here. So we passed through that thing because we were careful that the capital we had raised, we hoarded, and I refused to spend it. As all our VCs were saying, Ajit, spend, spend on advertising, make sure that you grow. I told them, kiddos, I've been through 3 or 4 recessions in my life. When these things happen, what you do is sit quietly in your office, make sure that people are well looked after, make sure all the algorithms you need for the next boom are getting ready, and don't spend money. So that's how we managed to conserve our capital. It came through that, the first dot-com bust. But I think, if at the risk of diverting the conversation, when we started, there was no internet users. We were the first website. Most people know that. Then we encountered the first boom, which is when mobile phones appeared. That in a fundamental way, it spread the internet and changed the way the game was played. And now there's a third thing, boom, technological wave about to burst open. That is a metaverse boom. So that is all going to have an even bigger impact on startups. So all of you kids who are about to do a startup, better master blockchain. The blockchain is the core. The new revolution, blockchain is even more of a revolution than TCP/IP. And it is not, people are getting distracted by that little accident which got created out of blockchain, where all the digital currencies, those are not important. Blockchain as a decentralized mode of behavior is going to change the world in an unrecognizable way. So that's as big as TCP/IP where it's not getting enough attention in India, and I'm working on it. I think I managed to do by blockchain coding in Python. I have personally mastered, and I'm teaching it to all the kids who join us. So I think there are these big technological changes which come, and it comes creeping on. You don't realize. But 9 out of 10 people, you ask them what is blockchain, they think it is cryptocurrencies, which is not. Cryptocurrency is one implementation of blockchain, but blockchain is going to destroy some centralized control. When the Industrial Revolution first brought technology, they all had things like factories and big banks. It's all centrally controlled to get efficiencies of scale, economies of scale. The blockchain has come with the revolution of a decentralized method of working. So that is going to be a mega revolution coming up. Okay. Sorry to distract the conversation. Yeah. Oh, Pranit has lost his connection.
Yeah, he's lost his connection.
I hope the rest of the gang are inside. Yeah. Oops.
Hopefully he'll come back now. Yeah, we'll wait.
We'll wait.
So to move on to the next question, while the blockchain is an interesting concept, many Indians today fail to even comprehend how the internet works. So on that note, let's ask another question. There is still a huge divide between an offline and online consumers. And in a country like India, people do find it hard to digest of the internet. They don't feel they can rely on buying something from a person they haven't seen before physically. So for the same reason, many consumers are not willing to ship online. So do you agree, or do you think that customers will flock when they see value, be it online or on an offline platform?
Vaithi, you want to go?
Sure. So, one of the reasons why significant amount of customers have shifted, at least a part of their shopping, if not most of their shopping online, millions of them over the last decade or so, has been primarily the commercial value. Let me give you an example. When one of the stores that we built in FabMart in those days was books. We had millions of books. And we tried to offer a proposition to the consumer saying, look, if you go to an offline bookstore, you'll get maybe 50,000 books. But you come online on our site, you'll get 5 million books, right? So the order of magnitude was different. So if you come, you get great selection, buy from us. But it didn't cut much ice. And, when you think back, you realize, who the hell's got the time to browse through 5 million titles anyway, right? Then we said, look, if you go offline, you go to a physical store, the store has a closing time. They start at 10 a.m. in the morning, they close at 8 p.m. Whereas, we are available 24 hours. So you could actually buy books from us, browse from a large selection at 2 a.m. in the morning. And I remember talking about these two things. And, sometimes talking to people, consumers, open up your eyes. So I remember focusing on these 2 points. I was addressing some students at IIM Bangalore. And one lady got up and said, well, why the hell would I shop from you at 2 a.m. in the morning? Because I'll be sleeping, right? And it's such an important fact. The reality is the biggest propositions of the internet shopping in those days, which is great selection and 24-hour shop opening, is really of no value to a consumer, right? Sure, it helps, but it's not the be all and end all. You can shop within a certain time. You can buy from 50,000 books is more than enough for you to buy and shop 5 million, for most people at least. But when there is enough capital available supporting a similar thing, and you say, any book you buy from me and I'll give you 50% off, now that is a tangible benefit, right? Because it's a tangible benefit, and suddenly people are saying, look, I'm getting a book at half the price. What's not to like? And that's what brings a whole lot. The book is just an example, but the same thing, you're looking at groceries, you're looking at apparel, you're looking at electronics. The fact of the matter is a commercial discount, which is value, has been the biggest single reason to drive millions of people onto online. My counterpoint to this is that in the event that internet e-commerce companies had not offered deep discounts, even today, I think the number of people who would have shifted online would be a much smaller number.
Okay, so Mr. Balakrishnan, on a similar note, what was the dynamic in Rediff? And do you agree that you feel that Indian consumers will flock when they see an opportunity or they see value, whether it be offline or online?
Okay, first of all, our own business model we have had to evolve and change over time. Most people, none of you may not know this, but right now our revenue is 85%, if not 90%, coming from enterprise email services. For example, you get a mail from HDFC Life that is powered by us. So we have about 28,000 enterprise customers like HDFC Life. And we set up a system where they can point and click and get up their own email system with 30,000 email users in their own bank, apart from others. So most of our battles today, we have a 20 or 25% share in India of the enterprise email market. We have a news site which people come and read news, but that's not a source of revenue. That's things we're doing for fun mostly. Our real business is enterprise email. And we also have free Rediff mail, but that's another story. So I think today what we are seeing is we are competing in that market with Microsoft and Google. You don't need two bigger guys to compete with. But I'm enjoying it. It's fun. I think each time to win a big account, I pat our kids on the back and they see it is like scoring a goal against Brazil in the World Cup. It's like that. So I think we have fun. So I think we're enjoying that. I think, of course, technologically you have to be very, very adept because things like security and spam control and things, every day the technology on that is going by leaps and bounds. But I think if you see a goal of your business it's like a game like football, having fun, having things and compete against big teams and win. That's how I view it. I don't see it as a way of creating wealth to leave to my others and so on. In the process, you earn wealth, it's good. But it's like a nice intellectual game where you can compete every day. And each time a competitor springs a new product feature, you don't die. You say, oh God, come on, let's go and beat that tomorrow. So that's the approach to entrepreneurship, which may not be the same for everybody. And for many, it is a question of building wealth and leaving it to their sons and daughters. I don't have kids, and even if I did, I wouldn't give them 1 rupee. I'd tell them, go earn for yourself, kiddos. So I think it depends on what the goal is that you're setting out to be an entrepreneur for. Obviously, when you're in college like you kids are, it's not easy to discover life goals. They occur to you along the way. But rest assured that the real entrepreneurs don't do it to create wealth for their family or wealth for their shareholders. The Wall Street and the financial types have created what is called the shareholder value maximization theory. They believe that the goal of every business is to maximize the wealth of its shareholders. I think that is all crap. That's not true. The goal of every business is to serve the citizens of that country or any other country with services to make their lives a little easier than what it is normally. That is the goal of every business. In the process, you earn, hopefully, enough margins to make sure that your people are paid in time and you have enough reserves for bad times which come. But I think one thought I'd like to leave with you guys in college is don't be an entrepreneur who wants to maximize shareholder benefits. Okay. It's a kind of a 15th century philosophy. Yeah? Okay.
So, Mr. Vaitheeswaran, on a similar note, while Mr. Balakrishnan is right that with the growth of the startup culture in India, there is a chase to become a unicorn, to draw the country's attention. So companies with bloated valuations and weak fundamentals are running blindly in the rat race. So how do you think this has changed over the years? More ventures in India back in the early 2000s operating with a much higher sense of purpose than startups today. And what do you believe rather is the larger purpose of entrepreneurship?
You're asking two very different questions together. So, I'm going to separate them because to me, an entrepreneur fundamentally is somebody who has the DNA of solving problems. And finding solutions to the problems are exactly like what Ajit said. The solutions to those problems must be such that they make a consumer or a citizen of this country's lives better, right? So that's the fundament. I mean, there's no dispute about it. It so happens that some of those problems consumers are aware of, and you go solve them. Some of those problems they're not aware of, but they're still problems, and you locate them, so you go solve them. So I think that's a broad thing, and because that's the DNA of the entrepreneur. No, I am not a big fan of what people call domain knowledge, right? I mean, so for example, we did an e-commerce startup in 99 and I was clueless about the word e-commerce. I didn't even know if there was a hyphen after e when we started e-commerce. That was how new it was. Now 20 years later, I'm doing a startup, I'm doing FMCG, I'm doing beverages. I've never been in FMCG in my life. I've never been in beverages, food and beverages in my life, but we created a product that in 3 years has a patent. It's the only patented beverage available in the market. Now, both those things are pioneering innovative venture simply because as an entrepreneur, you're trying to solve a problem, right? And the fact that we didn't know anything about e-commerce or didn't know anything about FMCG is not holding an entrepreneur back, right? So that's the key point. Now, as far as a unicorn is concerned, that's a totally different thing because a unicorn and becoming a unicorn, creating values which have, and differentiate. I think many of these entrepreneurs are not able to differentiate between value creation and valuation creation. So they created significant valuation, but there's not much value. The word that Ajit used is a very critical word in business: margins, right? If you're not able to deliver margins every time you make a transaction with a consumer, you're not creating enough value. And if you do that for a positive, over time you'll figure out a way of building a business that is sustainable. But if the margins itself are negative or very close to negative, you're not creating value, in which case you're forever dependent on somebody funding, providing value, providing the sub capital support, leading to what is called unicorns. But you've seen just in the space of 8 weeks, 100 unicorns are now less than 30, right? Which means 70 unicorns are no longer unicorns, right? So the fact of the matter is that if in 8 weeks it can drop from 100 to below 30, it essentially shows that 8 weeks back they really had no value. And to me, I'm not a big fan. I'm a big fan of startups creating value. I'm not a big fan of startups creating inflated valuations. So valuations are great, but it must be sustainable, profitable business. To me, if I look back the last 20, 30, 40 years, which would be a great company, I look back at a company like Infosys and say, look, they truly created value, right? Truly created value. They went into an area, they did an IPO, and they continue to create value, right? Now, whereas if you look back in the last 10 years, which is a great startup that has created value, I mean, hardly anything comes to your mind, right? In terms of somebody who's got sustained business model, somebody that seriously makes money, right? That's what the sad thing is many of the startups have already spent billions of dollars, several $100 million have gone into a business that continues to bleed money. In my view, they're simply badly run businesses. I mean, there's no other word for it. They're just badly run businesses.
So this is quite an interesting topic, and Mr. Balakrishnan, I'd like to get your take on this in more detail as well on what the state of the startup culture is today on value creation, and as Mr. Vaitheeswaran said, valuation creation. So what do you think the dynamic is like today, and what was it like before?
I'll tell you one of the important things in the demographics in India when you start a business. Back in the late 80s, I was in Bangalore and together with Nandan and Narayanamurthy, we were all startups at that time. I was part of a company called PSI Data Systems, which was co-founded by myself and two Stanford computer science graduates of that time, both Indians. So in almost all of Bangalore, we were all huddling there making personal computers, which was a big and PDP-11 equivalent servers, hardware. We were coding, building the circuit board, getting the software done, etc. But we couldn't make any progress, all of us. So what happened suddenly, the Y2K phenomena appeared. Y2K is suddenly when, the year 2000 came, all over America and Europe, they had to change code by, had to be hand changed into new digits. So then all of them jumped. I refused to do that jumping, but what they wanted as foreign companies wanted you to hire Indian programmers, put them on your payroll, train them how to recode Y2K, and post them in their locations in America. That was the start of body shopping, and thank God, I think Nandan and Murthy and others jumped at it, and they did that. So all of the entire Indian tech industry became one of what I would look back and say called body shopping. Hire people, train them, and post them at their customers' enterprises in the United States physically. You pay them 5,000 or 10,000 rupees a month, but you charge your customer $10,000 a month. That was your margin. Okay, so that's how the Indian IT industry grew, and all these companies that all of you respect and invest in this tech market, you can see virtually 90% of them are what are called IT services companies, quote within brackets, body shoppers. Okay, all innovation has gone from here. Okay, they'll never discuss it openly. But that is the nature of India, because the price difference between what foreign customers will pay you and what Indian customers are willing to pay you is massive. Even today, for example, we have about 20 million people visiting us every month, and of which 2, 3, 4 million people come to read news. But if an American NRI clicks on it, the price you get for that click is about 6 times what you get for an Indian clicks on it. Okay, so the result that our team is always saying, sir, let us go and get more American users. So the relative purchasing power of India is, so low. So that is an important thing. Anything that you do, you suddenly realize that Americans or the Europeans will pay 5 or 6 times the price. So you don't have an incentive to do anything here if you're looking for money only. And added just one more word. I know you're running short of time. But the other part is when VCs, practically all of them I know all the time that I tell them I'm half an anthropologist and, who wants to research, unknown tribes and all that stuff. Then you guys, VCs are like an unknown tribe to me. So I'll come to your island and then learn what you're going to do. All of them, their goal is to put some money into a so-called startup, and within 3 or 4 years, flip it by selling it to some American company which wants to enter India. So there's VC funding efforts, an indirect way of entry into India. Take, for example, Walmart. They couldn't enter India. People fought against them. So they paid a gigantic price and acquired Flipkart and jumped into India. So many of the VC efforts are indirect efforts by the American capital group to enter India. This is true for Amazon. If you see Amazon's key supplier, I guess you guys know who that is, right? Yeah, I dare not say it in an open meeting. Go check whose main supplier it is. You'll find out. Yeah? So I think it's nature. It's called the political economy of entrepreneurship. In India, we don't get early support from defense to tech-oriented companies. And the market prices that you get for your product is 10 times outside India than in India. So that we have to live with. But at the same time, let me not be negative. We have Nandan and team persuaded the government to introduce Aadhaar. So that was a great entrepreneurship effort by those guys. Okay, and then you have people who have created the, all the Dr. Amul, Korean created Amul, which is it's a fantastic effort by which all local farmers can contribute the milk and get higher revenue. So you can be an entrepreneur without being a personal enrichment type. Like Dr. Korean of Amul is one such case, and the man who Sridharan, who's built all the railways for us. So when you guys graduate, you can be an entrepreneur and do public service and build giant setups, which will like in the case of Amul and Mr. Sridharan, the I think you can create benefit for citizens. It doesn't have to make personal money out of all that. Just remember that. I've talked too much. I think.
So,
I think.
on that note, let's quickly bring it back to Mr. Vaitheeswaran, and I'd also want your take on the culture that venture capital firms set on companies and startups, and how they look for early exits in 3 to 4 years, which puts a lot of pressure on startups and causes them to churn out substandard products. How was that different back then, and how did ventures grow in the eras where funding was not pouring so easily into the country?
So, like I mentioned earlier, I think the reality is that we didn't have the kind of capital support that is available today. And hence, it was always a challenge trying to raise funding and support. I mean, we didn't, there weren't any groups of VCs. You couldn't go to Google and list out here the top 10 VCs in Bangalore. Nothing was available there, right? So, we had to figure out our own ways of reaching out to people who may be interested in supporting startups in India. Very few and far in between. And of course, when the dot-com bust happened, the bottom dropped out, so life became difficult. But on that subject, I actually want to make a very different point. I think one of the key challenges for Indian entrepreneurs, even today, despite so much of VC support to actually grow a business, is I think what India needs is Indian capital. And the reason they need Indian capital is very simple. I think Indian capital, people who have money, it could be angels, it could be funds, but anything where the money is available in India will be able to support. See, it takes several years to build a business, right? Depending on the nature of the business, it could take a minimum of 4 years to 7 years to 10, 12 years before you build a 10 sustainable business. And Indian capital will be patient capital and able to support an entrepreneur. The reason VCs are not, in that sense, a challenge for Indian entrepreneurs is that most of them are trying to exit in a 4 year. So, what happens is VCs invest in an Indian company. The Indian entrepreneur is saying, can I build a business over the next 10 years? The VC who's invested is saying, can I sell my stake and make money out of it in 4 years? In other words, the capital and the business are not on the same page, right? And that's a huge challenge. And obviously one way of doing that is to see, can we get patient Indian capital, more of patient. I'm not saying all capital should be Indian, but I think more and more Indian people should come and support Indian entrepreneurs, giving entrepreneurs more time to patiently build sustainable business. So one of the reasons we're chasing valuations is because what else can you chase? If your idea is to exit the business in 4 years, you can't build value, right? And therefore you create valuation. But if the entrepreneur is saying, don't worry, I've got your back for the next 12 years, go build a business, create value, then there's no pressure to create valuation. Then the pressure is to create value. And I think that's a real challenge that needs to be solved very quickly.
So there's an interesting question that our CEO has brought up, and let me read that out. So he brings up the point that, so you mentioned that startups needing Indian capital, but with the recent startup IPOs opening at a discount, how can that trust within shareholders be built?
Who is it? Are you addressing it to me?
Yeah,
either of you, and Mr.
Yeah,
Vaitheeswaran, you can take that up. All right.
Okay, don't focus all your attention on pricing and discounting and IPO prices and after. I think that's kind of an awful mentality. Don't think about all that. Of course, sometimes you're unlucky, you will open at a discount, and sometimes it will rise back. What's the big deal? You look at the stock market, goes up and down. You can't make a song and dance out of it. Look at what they are doing. Are they benefiting anyone? What is the underlying thing? So what does it matter when IPO opens at a discount? It doesn't make any difference. The goal of life cannot be to maximize your wealth, or what is worse, maximize your shareholders' wealth. Come on. How do I convince all of you at BITS Pilani to say, stop looking at shareholder value and discounts of shareholder value and IPOs, and discuss how do you do product innovation? How do you conquer blockchain? Yeah. Because if Indian entrepreneurs don't have some startups around blockchain, I think as a country, we'll be left behind in the race altogether. Yeah. Okay.
So with this, I'd like to ask a quick, short question first directed to you, Mr. Vaitheeswaran. In a few words, what advice would you give to budding entrepreneurs, students, and young startups that are looking to scale up and create a successful venture? What would your advice be in a few words?
Oh, I have just 3 words to anybody wanting to start up. It's very simple. Just do it. That's it. What else is there? Do it. There's nothing else. Just do it.
Yeah. Mine too is just do it, but with the addition, never take money from a VC. They will destroy your business. Yeah. Please remember that, kiddos. Yeah.
Okay, then thank you, Mr. Balakrishnan and Mr. Vaitheeswaran, for such an engaging and interesting conversation. And it was really fascinating to watch you all talk about, internet first companies over the ages and talk about your commonalities. And we're excited to now move on and present our next panel.
Thank you so much for having us.
We log out, guys. Pranit?
Yeah, go ahead. It was great to have you. I host you on the India portfolio.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.